Okay, live again. Just keeping this rolling. Trying to maintain like really good habits as far as getting content out. So I had a quick lunch break. Tried setting up a few other things. I think I got a functional microphone here. It may not be calibrated quite well. I'm gonna dial up the sound I think on that a little bit. But since I have a quick lunch break, I figured I'd spend 25, 30 minutes. Do a quick head drawing. Um, and, I got to make it a little bit interesting. So I guess I figured maybe I'll make a head that maybe has some dental issues. That seem like fun, right? Who doesn't love some rotten teeth? Um, I'm going to make this pretty sketchy. So I'm going to, I like darker grounds, but so I'm going to make this pretty quick. I also have some ideas maybe to do a head with, or do a series of heads sort of like proportional, sort of turning. I think that'd be really good as far as like sort of a 101 kind of drawing instructional. It's also sort of instructional if you're like interested in sculpture or doing like portrait sculpture. The idea that you can capture a single head from a bunch of different angles is really useful. And for this drawing, I'm not going to actually use any source materials on this, although, I will sort of state this in the last video. Source materials make things a lot easier, but if you're doing your basics, it's not absolutely necessary. I like drawing from my imagination anyway. So for this one, I think it's very important to sort of start with that circular kind of idea of the base of the skull sort of jutting out, but the overall shape of the head is very much an oval. And then that sort of halfway point is generally where your eye line would go, as well as sort of dictating. One second. Dictating where that ear is going to go as well. So you can start defining that a little bit already. It's also sometimes useful to define the jawline, but first I'm going to do one of these just to define the midpoint of the face. I'm just trying to get the contours of the head a little bit, and then I'm going to start with that brow line, working the eye line. This is a pretty meaty looking sort of comic book-esque kind of boy with thick chiseled jaw. So since I'm doing kind of a meat boy, let me make him like an extra meat face. I'm gonna the nose generally falls about the quarter line, halfway between the bottom of the chin and the halfway line mark of the eye. So I'm sort of doing the basic shape of the nose. I am doing a broken nose, so that's why you sort of see that smushed line here rather than it coming straight out. And then I'll do some eyes as well, sort of oval eyes, but keep in mind the eyeballs are actually the eyeballs are spheres. So much of the lids, both the lower lids and the upper lids, kind of follow that sphere, and sort of locks that sphere into place. There are sort of cheekbones, right? That sort of graph on here. And as I'm doing this, as I'm sort of doing the basic kind of proportions, you can also see how I'm sort of like tweaking this slightly over time, making like little tiny edits, little tiny adjustments before you sort of lock it in. Things should be very adjustable, especially early on in your drawing. So, you'll see sort of double lines, hairlines, you sort of see things change. I'm working on an iPad, so obviously these things are really easy to edit and adjust in digital. But honestly, I'm doing this in a very similar way that I would do in pencil. It's really the same principle. I might work a little bit lighter, but ultimately, usually I take an eraser, sort of adjust and tweak. And even if you look at my work, a lot of it can just be just in pen. And when I'm working with pen, I use very, very thin lines, but you can still see those adjustments being made, even like the thinnest, even in like these thin little lines, you can sort of see my adjustments changing and sort of adjusting over time as I sort of work more in an area. Um, I would maybe, since I've been drawing faces my entire life, I would maybe like shy away from doing these like midpoint lines like that or like this. But but yeah, I mean, but yeah, the shapes, the contours, these little adjustments, they are constant in drawing and in painting too. Painting, I feel like things need to be a little more rigid, but as you're doing the drawing, you can adjust, you can change things, and nobody should ever feel like they're screwing up or messing up. It's such a funny thing. That's how so many people kind of quit art, is that they feel like they can't make it perfect. There's a certain frustration to the art making process. They're not seeing what they expected. Which, by the way, I did not expect to make a face that looks like this. So, when I thought about doing a person with tooth issues, this was not what I had in mind. He looks very much like a Marvel character to me. Definitely a side character, but still kind of like Eddie Brock. So I did start drawing some teeth here as a reference source. This pencil is smaller. This is very dark. It's going very quickly. So I did start drawing some teeth as kind of a reference, because because there's a symmetry to the face. So if I'm gonna know like where teeth are or where they aren't, or if I'm gonna draw some teeth but not all the teeth, it's pretty helpful to at least draw some as a sort of guide. So this poor dude, he's gonna have a broken tooth here. But let me actually sculpt a little bit at the bottom lip. So he's gonna be kind of biting his lip a little bit. So we're gonna do that, and that should make his mouth stand out, I think, a little bit where he's got those missing teeth. So he's got a broken tooth here. Let's do another broken one here. Make it so it looks like he got really smashed in a fight. Do that sort of canine, not too sharp, and make it kind of blunt. And I have done portraits of people with sort of meth mouth, where things are, not just sort of punched in, but totally rotten. And honestly, it's really, really fun to draw, but I did feel pretty guilty on finishing it, because I felt it was very interesting. I thought it was very evocative, but I was basing it off of an actual reference of someone, and when I wrapped up on it, I actually, and I published it, I did feel a certain I'm going to say regret is the right word, but pause on the state of what's happening in the world and how difficult that must be. You don't live in this world to exploit others, or at least hope you don't. And there could be something very exploitive about being an artist who's drawing references from a wide pool, including people who are not aware of what you're doing. So the goal, at least the goal with that particular piece of artwork, was to transform it in a way that it wasn't simply just about illustrating an individual's suffering. Took on some other more abstract kind of sensibilities. But this guy I don't really need to worry about at all because he's totally original. He's the most original man. He seems very happy with his decisions. Big old smile on his face. Big, very, very big eyes. I guess that's going to be a quick one. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm kind of just sculpting. I continue to sort of just sculpt with a pencil. I'm trying to like define my light source a little bit here. I made the eyes kind of dark. And maybe I'll just do that. Maybe it'll be like a very sort of harsh overhead lighting. Maybe it'd be nice. So we'll sort of, any area that's sort of in shadow or sort of casting a shadow from that top light source is going to get dinged, or is going to get cast pretty big shadow. So, you know, this top lip might actually have some highlights. Anywhere where there's going to be a shadow from that facial geography, it's going to get sort of in the dark. And as far as what I'm using in Procreate right now, I'm using the standard tool set, standard drawing tool set. This is a 6B pencil, standard Procreate 6B. So it's laying down some digital graphite pretty quickly, which is kind of what I wanted. You can see I'm not really. I'm trying to think of the lighting, right? So sort of coming down real harsh. So top of the head could be very bright, whereas the bottom is going to cast a lot of darkness. Whatever neck he's got. So I'll just do a neck here. And I guess the top of the ear would be casting a lot. And then this would cast a huge shadow. Even some of these other inward areas of the head might be kind of dim. I do think he's got some pretty bushy brows, but no hair up top. I don't know. I guess I will do some hair. And what is that hair gonna look like? Yeah, he looks like a pretty deranged Jeff Bezos right now, I would say. Like, look at that boy. So yeah, I'm gonna do some hair. Why not? He's just gonna have it's a little bit. I'm just trying to think of how the light's gonna affect the head. So let's imagine that he's got dark hair, and that there's gonna be a very good spot on that. I'm actually doing the forehead right now. This guy's got kind of male pattern baldness. That's the decision I made. I will stick with that. Okay, so it's got some hair. So hair, generally, you're not going to do like sort of individual hairs. You sort of do areas to help define the shine of that light source for the hair. And this is actually a little bit off, I think, on the light source, but let's imagine like there's gonna be a lot of light on the very, very top, less so on the sides, less as it wraps around. pretty. Oh, did I lose the air server? Come on, air server. You're driving me nutty. Okay, so it's looking pretty beautiful. This is not the most refined drawing. A lot of my other works are not done at this sort of speed. But I think there are a couple little things I could do to sort of help clean it up a little bit. You know, there's a lot of sort of playing with the. Is this working? There we go. There's a lot of kind of playing with the reshaping of it and doing it very quickly and very dark. But I'm using a smudge, which I normally kind of hate in drawings, but I could use this a little bit, maybe not so strong. And you could at times do this, and also in drawings, like I love doing this honestly with erasers, with pencils, is you take those initial marks and you sort of remove, you remove a lot of the mark making, well, especially a lot of the really harsh mark making, if you've got really harsh lines. And then you can kind of work back into them. Because really what I did here is I've defined this head, and I sort of drew it really quickly, right? And I sort of got all the major parts down. And then what you can do, I'm gonna make this actually a longer drawing here. What you can do after you've sort of defined everything and you sort of drawn everything in, you sort of remove a lot of those details, a lot of those things, particularly like those things that are like important to look at. It'll sort of give you a view of the general shape and contours of what you've created. But then when you go back in after you've sort of done this sort of softening and sort of removing of a lot of that line work, when you go back in, you could be much more detailed and precise about the things you've done. And it does a couple things. I think it creates a certain quality of almost, a bit like a Renaissance painting, even if you're doing like a Renaissance drawing, honestly, where you sort of see this like layering. You sort of see it's got this quality of like things being revealed by all that layering and sort of refinement. And then it gives you an opportunity to really have a lot more confidence and definition, and it gives you a lot more. It just gives you a much better sort of artistic confidence to make much more thoughtful marks, rather than the sort of exploratory marks of trying to define the shapes. So what I can do is and see, like, even though I've sort of smudged out a lot of this drawing, you still see this guy. You still like know what's happening here. It's just not as defined. But now what I can do is, I'm just gonna do a little more. What I could do is I could take that pencil. Maybe I don't want to work with it. Maybe I don't want to work with the 6B because that was actually pretty aggressive. I'll do the Derwent pencil, which I think is just a lot softer. And I think I got a pretty decent size and opacity, and I made that actual pencil a little bit darker as well. So what I can do is, rather than, I could have done this earlier too. I didn't have to quite go so aggressive in black. I could have just softly worked towards this from the get-go. But there's another way of doing it where you sort of work very aggressive, and then you could sort of go back in, and then as you work now, you can sort of tell I could be way more gentle as screen mirroring keeps shutting down. I don't know if it's a matter of my internet or what. Or my iPad, maybe. I'm not exactly sure how well this reads on the screen video, but essentially now that I've got a shape that's already pretty well defined, I can then go in and add a lot more detail. And then I can sort of have a lot more decision making around where I want to have that detail, where I want to apply it. And generally, a lot of painters, a lot of portrait painters, you put the detail where, the emphasis, the focus is going to be on the figure. So you might not put a ton of detail in the clothes or maybe in the background, because those are secondary areas, and you may be like very quick about like how the mark making in something like the clothing, or the background, but you put a lot of emphasis, for instance, on the eyes, right? One second, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here with the... Unbelievable. But yeah, I could put in a lot more detail with those eyes. And I'll also add highlights to this too, because right now this is very dark. Sort of go in to find the lid. Define some of the brow. Again, I'm still being pretty area oriented. I might add a little bit of mark making to just define a little bit of extra brow detail. But for the most part, it's pretty area oriented. And then this guy is got cross-eyed, or it's not cross-eyed, but he's got a lazy eye. One thing that's actually kind of a challenge for, depending upon your experience level, and even a lot of portrait painters and Renaissance painters have had this issue, which is like how to align the eyes. Sometimes you could try to draw the eye. You'll when you're doing your artwork, you'll draw one eye in a very specific position, and then you look at the second eye, and there could be a shift, especially if the person's like looking at you and they switch which eye they're looking at, and it can create this like really weird effect as the work is getting completed, where you have shifty eyes, and I don't know, that just goes to stress like how important it is to like get some early drawings, feel liberated to sort of adjust and not be too constrained to what you see in front of you, and make little adjustments when you think they're necessary, and not being too rigid. Sometimes people just white knuckle it, I think, when they see an image, and they might, and I imagine it's probably kind of how it was for Renaissance artists, who were trying to be so careful and close to the things that were in front of them. I think this is like pre-photography, but then you sort of get a little bit lost in the details, and you don't actually realize what you're doing when you're zoomed out. So be aware of the large details as you get into that minutia. You might have like 1,000 little layers for an eye, but if you have a miscalculation, which, by the way, for me this is not a miscalculation, this is intentional, it will come back to haunt you. And one thing that I think is important to note here is the eyeball, as juicy and glorious and white and shiny as it is, it does have its own shadows. It is not a perfectly white thing. Do not make super bright glowing eyeballs. Although, hey, your mileage may vary. I'm probably not the person to talk to if you're trying to get a million Instagram likes. If you want to do that, keep on drawing models. And people that don't have broken teeth, I'm just doing some folds of the chin. So like I said, I've already defined the chin, so it allows me to define largely the shape of the head. So it allows me to sort of come back in with these much more detailed line work. And now it's time to draw some lips. I try to draw the this face pretty quickly. So again, I'm just defining those teeth over again. But now that I'm defining the teeth, I'm defining them like in a very much more like easy to do than I've done before, where I was sort of trying to get a feel for the form. Now I think I have a pretty good leg to stand on to do this. I'm not sure if you hear my kids in the background. They are surprising each other, I guess. I don't know. My 4-year-old is a master of surprises. So much so that it's hardly surprising. I'm going to have to probably end this pretty soon, given that I'm on lunch break. I need to get back to work. But let me just try to wrap this mouth up a little bit. Again, I'm sort of defining this line a little bit more. I don't usually like making like really hard edge lines, just as a general rule. I usually I always feel like if there's some real darks, because it's shadow, because blacks live in the shadow, they're usually not hard edged in reality. They're usually very soft. They usually blend into each other. The blacks and the grays tend to blend. So as you sort of see how I'm doing here, with that line of the mouth, it's like, I was defining the line of the mouth, but also that black kind of blends with a lot of things around it. So the bottom of the lip gets a little shadow, and we'll get it here as well. And the blacks are never quite, you're never going to quite get a super rigid line. I mean, unless you're going for, something, at least not naturalistically. If you're going for something like stylistically, you're doing linear artwork, which I do too, then for sure play with the line density, line weight. But in nature, when you think about a horror movie, for instance, in a dark room in a haunted house, you think about the definitions of a door, for instance, where a spooky ghoul is going to magically appear with its super ghost powers and super spook visions. Usually the whole environment, right, it's poorly defined. It doesn't have clarity in it. It's in the dark, right? So, and even when there is light, if you're defining your darks, generally speaking, they're going to be blended. trying some shadow here. I'm sort of doing like an extra bend the lip. It's not a typical kind of musculature to do this. But yeah, this is a special boy. Sort of just defining these teeth a little bit more. I gotta say that there's the gaps between these teeth are looking a little unrealistic, but yeah. And then I'm just gonna try to define shadow in here. I'm gonna try not to let the bottom of this be too dark in here, because then I think I'm just gonna chip this tooth too, actually. Define this bottom lip a little bit more. Again, it casts a shadow on its own. And I might even gray this tooth out a little bit. Oh. So I could spend a lot more time working on this, to be honest. I'm trying to make this very quick. Ooh. Why is it so dark? That got pretty dark there. Oh well. That's for the best. I don't want to work too dark again, but oh well. He looks a bit like someone who got involved in one of those Southern slap contests. Proud warrior. Just going to define the eye a little bit more. And then I think what time is that? Ooh, I got to get going soon. So I'm going to try to be really quick on my mark making here. Just going to define the ear a little bit more. Just going to try to work around a little bit. Define. I made these eyes very, very dark, and I'm going to go in. I'm just going to do that. The cheesy touch of highlights in a second. I do like sort of defining how broken this nose is real quick. Just noting on that shape. This could be a very nice guy. I mean, he's smiley. I've met enough people in Seattle that can be both troubled and friendly, who live on the streets. What can be a little difficult to discern, though, is sometimes people have problems you're not exactly sure. While they may be initially friendly, they may turn on you. Which I've both had like friendly conversations. I've definitely had friendly conversations where people just snap at me. Because they're sensitive and troubled, and I don't even have to make a joke or anything. They just read the tone as being something other than what I intended, or they have real problems, and their attitudes can sway. And this person feels of that pain. gone more extreme with the highlights. I could have gone more extreme with the darks. But this is a pretty quick sketch. And I'm just going to make those teeth a little bit darker. And I'm going to now just, I'm going to make the nose darker too. I'm going to make highlights on it. But yeah, this is a pretty well proportioned head. He's got a pretty big forehead, all considering now that I'm done with it. Maybe that could have been changed slightly, but I think usually a lot of drawings, they tend not to properly define the actual full size of the head. Emphasis is so commonly on the face that faces become huge, and then you have no forehead at all. So this is definitely, I think, more in keeping with reality than a lot of other drawings would be. So now that I'm making a new layer, I'm just going to add some highlights to this, right? And I'm just going to be very, bold about them. I think it's going to add a lot to be pretty bold. And I know it's starting off with some pretty harsh lighting up top. And you know what? I'm going to do real quick. Can't do this in a real drawing, but I'm going to make this a little darker. And by making it darker, you can really see those highlights stand out. So yeah, I was going to make the top of the head pretty bold, but there are certain things I do want to stand out, like portions of the mouth, especially portions of the teeth that got kind of broken. They're not that clear because they're like in that dark mouth, but you can see how that really makes it stand out. Top of the nose. This nose is broken. I think having the bridge be really prominent is important. Maybe the top of the chin is extra prominent, so you can have, if it's pretty top lit, it's pretty much coming down like this. You're going to really emphasize those parts that stick out from up above. Right, and even maybe emphasizing the hair a little bit too, right? That brow line is going to be very defined. And even maybe the inside here, so maybe in there even more so than the top. Of the eye. I think the top, the very, very top of the eye is probably getting some shadow on it. So then it might be some more of that reflected light that's a little bit further down, sort of protruding from the eye. All right, so I'm going to put that right. I don't always like putting these sort of things in here, but like always putting like dots and highlights in the eyes, I think is kind of cheesy if you were to always do it. If it's just always a standard thing, it does add. I can't believe how many times the mirroring software has shut down on me today. Reconnecting. Okay. And I'm just going to add a little bit to the ear along the top. I'm just going to really go quickly now because I got to get back to work. of the head. Maybe I'll smudge that a little bit. Just why not? Put this on some later anyway. Be a little more forgiving. But there we go. There you have it. Give me a little smooch. Mwah. 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 Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you maybe learned something about dental care, highlights, sketching out quickly shapes of the face. I'm running at 40 minutes now. I could get back to work. If you like my content, like, subscribe, follow. I am trying to set this up to be a little more functional than what it's currently been. So any of your help, if you want to join Patreon, there are options to get zines and art, original art and prints from me as well as like sort of just being closer to the community, and allows you to sort of interact with me much more easily than you typically might.